Yeah.
Your first celebrity crush?
A car trunk, the trunk of a car.
A trunk of a car. That is not, he's not serious.
Ellen DeGeneres may have built her brand around kindness, but behind the scenes, she hasn't welcomed everyone. From outspoken stars to controversial figures, several celebrities have found themselves banned from her beloved talk show. Today, we uncover who made the list and why Ellen decided they were off limits. The world of daytime television is built on a foundation of manufactured fun. It's a universe of celebrity anecdotes, light-hearted games, and carefully curated interviews designed to make viewers at home feel good. For nearly 2 decades, the undisputed queen of this universe was Ellen DeGeneres. Her show, with its mantra of "be kind," was supposed to be the safest, happiest place on television. A visit to Ellen's couch was a rite of passage for stars, a signal that you had made it. But behind the dancing and the giveaways, a different narrative began to take shape, one whispered in green rooms and spoken about in hushed tones. It was a story of awkward encounters, uncomfortable questions, and public humiliations. And for some celebrities, a single appearance on that famous white couch would be their last. They would never be invited back, entering the unofficial, yet very real, list of people seemingly banned from the show. This isn't just about a host having a bad day. It's a look at the moments when the mask slipped, revealing a complex and often troubling dynamic between a powerful host and her guests, long before the world learned about the show's allegedly toxic workplace. One of the most clear-cut, publicly dissected moments of this dynamic unfolded in November 2019. The guest was Dakota Johnson, an actress known for her quiet demeanor and a certain air of Hollywood royalty, being the daughter of Don Johnson and Melanie Griffith. She was there to promote her new film, The Peanut Butter Falcon, what was supposed to be a standard. Friendly chat quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortably iconic moments in modern talk show history. It all started with Ellen's opening gambit, which was meant to be a light-hearted ribbing. Ellen turned to Dakota and said, "Happy belated birthday. How was the party? I wasn't invited." The audience laughed, as they were conditioned to do. It seemed like a classic Ellen joke, putting her guest on the spot in a playful way, but Dakota Johnson did not play along. She didn't laugh it off or offer a polite, evasive answer. Instead, she paused, looked directly at Ellen, and delivered a line that would echo across the internet. "Actually, no, that's not the truth." Ellen. The air in the studio seemed to change in an instant. The audience's laughter died down, replaced by a palpable tension. Dakota continued, calm and firm. "You were invited. Last time I was on the show, last year, you gave me a bunch of grief about not inviting you. But I didn't even know you wanted to be invited." She was referencing a previous appearance where Ellen had indeed made a similar joke. Dakota was making it clear that she had made sure to correct that this time around. She went on, "I did invite you, and you didn't come." The ball was now in Ellen's court. She looked genuinely flustered, caught off guard. She tried to recover, stammering, "You did? How do you know I didn't come?" Her defense seemed weak, as if she was searching for an out. Dakota, relentless in her factual correction, replied, "Well, I don't know. Ask everybody. Ask your producer, Jonathan. She even pointed off stage." At this point, Ellen was visibly scrambling. She questioned whether she was invited, asking if it was a text or how the invitation was delivered. She then tried to deflect, saying, "I don't remember that at all, but the damage was done." A producer off camera could be heard confirming that Ellen was, in fact, out of town that weekend. Ellen, trying to save face, claimed, "Oh yeah, I had that thing." She then quickly changed the subject to Dakota's party, which featured a performance by comedian Tig Notaro. "She's my favorite comedian," Ellen said, trying to find common ground. But Dakota landed one final subtle blow. "She's your favorite comedian?" she asked, with a slight, knowing smile. She then added, "Tig is hilarious, but I was just talking to my favorite comedian, you." The comment was delivered with a smile, but the underlying context was sharp. The entire exchange, lasting only a minute or two, was a masterclass in quiet confrontation. Dakota Johnson hadn't raised her voice or been rude. But she had refused to participate in the show's familiar power dynamic, where the host could say anything and the guest was expected to absorb it with a smile. She held her ground and corrected a false narrative on live television. The clip went viral almost immediately. People online praised Dakota for her composure and her refusal to be steamrolled. For many viewers, this was the first significant crack they saw in the "be kind" facade. It wasn't just an awkward moment, it was a moment of public accountability. Commentators pointed out that Ellen's initial joke wasn't entirely harmless. It was a subtle power play, designed to make the guest seem neglectful or forgetful, positioning Ellen as a sympathetic figure who was left out. Dakota simply refused to accept that premise. The incident became a symbol for a growing sentiment that Ellen's on-screen persona might not be the whole story. While Dakota Johnson was never officially banned, she never returned to the show before it ended. The viral nature of the confrontation, and the way it made Ellen look, likely made a future invitation highly improbable. The interaction stood as a stark example of what could happen when a guest didn't follow the unwritten rules, and for many, it marked the beginning of the end for the public's perception of Ellen DeGeneres. Long before Dakota Johnson's quiet rebellion, another deeply uncomfortable interview took place that, in hindsight, is one of the most troubling in the show's history. This one involved Mariah Carey, one of the biggest music superstars on the planet. The year was 2008. Mariah was on the show to promote her album EMC Squared. At the time, rumors were swirling in the tabloids that she and her new husband, Nick Cannon, were expecting their first child. This kind of speculation is standard fare for celebrities of her stature, and most hosts would handle it with a degree of delicacy. Ellen, however, took a different approach. She brought up the pregnancy rumors directly, and Mariah, clearly uncomfortable, tried to deflect with laughter and vague answers. She wasn't confirming or denying anything, which is a celebrity's prerogative, especially in the early stages of a pregnancy when the risk of miscarriage is high, and many choose to wait before making a public announcement. But Ellen would not let it go. She was determined to get a scoop, to force a reveal live on her show. The interview took a turn when Ellen said, "Let's toast to you not being pregnant." She then pulled out a bottle of champagne and 2 flutes. The move was a trap, and a cruel one at that. Ellen had created a no-win situation for Mariah Carey. If she drank the champagne, she would be fueling speculation that she was not pregnant, which might be a lie. If she refused to drink, it would be taken as a tacit confirmation of her pregnancy, forcing her to reveal her personal medical information before she was ready. The pressure was immense. The cameras were rolling, the live studio audience was watching, and millions more were watching at home. Mariah looked visibly distressed. She tried to play it off, saying, "I can't believe you're doing this to me, Ellen." She nervously laughed and said, "This is peer pressure." She took a tiny, fake sip from the glass, but the damage was done. Ellen had her gotcha moment, exclaiming, "You're pregnant!" The audience erupted in applause, but the moment was anything but celebratory. It was a profound violation of Mariah's privacy, broadcast for the world to see. The story took a tragic turn a short time later. Mariah Carey suffered a miscarriage. The public wouldn't learn about this detail for years, but it casts the entire interview in a horrific light. Ellen had not only pressured a woman to reveal her pregnancy, but had done so while that pregnancy was incredibly vulnerable. In 2020, during an interview with Vulture, Mariah Carey finally spoke about the incident in detail. She said, "I was extremely uncomfortable with that moment, is all I can say. And I really have had a hard time grappling with the aftermath." She didn't hold back, explaining the emotional toll it took on her. "I wasn't ready to tell anyone because I'd had a miscarriage. I don't want to throw anyone that's already being thrown under any proverbial bus, but I didn't enjoy that moment." She described it as a moment of empathy desert, where her own feelings and privacy were disregarded for the sake of a television segment. After this incident, Mariah Carey did not return to the Ellen DeGeneres show for many years. The experience was clearly traumatic, and it's hard to imagine why she would ever want to put herself in that position again. While the show's producers might not have sent out an official memo banning her, the actions of the host created a situation so toxic that a return was unthinkable. It stands as one of the most glaring examples of the show prioritizing a sensational moment over the humanity of its guest. Another celebrity who has been exceptionally vocal about her negative relationship with Ellen is comedian Kathy Griffin. Griffin, known for her sharp, no-holds-barred comedy, has never been one to shy away from Hollywood feuds. Her story with Ellen, however, feels less like a typical celebrity spat and more like a window into the cliquey, often unforgiving nature of the industry's elite. According to Griffin, her issues with Ellen go back years, long before the public began to question the "be kind" image. Griffin has spoken about it in her books and in numerous interviews, claiming that there is a daytime talk show host who has a mean streak that all of Hollywood knows about. While she was initially coy, she eventually confirmed she was talking about Ellen DeGeneres. The core of their feud, from Griffin's perspective, stems from an experience she had after the death of the legendary comedian Joan Rivers in 2014. Rivers was a mentor and a close friend to Griffin. In an interview, Griffin recalled a phone conversation she had with Ellen shortly after Rivers' passing. Griffin claimed that Ellen, despite being a fellow comedian and a trailblazer for women in comedy, had nothing but criticism for Joan Rivers' humor. According to Griffin, Ellen told her that she felt Rivers' comedy was mean and that she hated her. For Griffin, who was grieving the loss of her friend, this was deeply hurtful. It felt unnecessarily cruel and dismissive of a comedy icon's legacy. This conversation seemed to solidify Griffin's view of Ellen as someone who, behind the scenes, was far from the kind and inclusive person she appeared to be on television. The feud escalated publicly after that. Griffin has recounted a story about being at a party and trying to say hello to Ellen, only to be completely ignored. She also claimed that she was kicked out of Ellen's dressing room at the Daytime Emmy Awards. But perhaps the most telling incident involved Griffin's appearance on Ellen's show. Griffin described the experience as incredibly controlled and sterile. She felt that she wasn't allowed to be her authentic, provocative self. She claims she was told what she could and could not talk about, and that the entire experience felt less like a conversation and more like a tightly controlled performance designed to fit into Ellen's specific brand of safe, non-confrontational humor. The animosity became so pronounced that it allegedly had professional consequences for Griffin. In a 2019 interview, Griffin stated that Ellen had her banned from the show. "I am banned from that show," she said directly. She believed that Ellen, as a powerful figure in Hollywood, had a direct hand in this. Griffin's story is significant because it's not about a single, awkward interview. It's about a long-standing personal and professional conflict. It suggests a pattern of behavior where Ellen allegedly used her power to sideline those she didn't like. Griffin's claims paint a picture of an industry where personal slights can lead to professional blacklisting. And because Griffin is a comedian who has built her career on speaking truth to power and exposing Hollywood hypocrisy, her accusations carry a certain weight. She wasn't just a disgruntled guest, she was an industry insider who was willing to pull back the curtain. Her outspokenness against Ellen, years before the toxic workplace scandal broke, was a lonely and often dismissed position. But in retrospect, her stories provided an early, crucial piece of the puzzle, suggesting that the universally beloved host might have a side that her audience never got to see. The ban, in this case, seems less like a possibility and more like a certainty, at least from Kathy Griffin's well-documented point of view. The list of celebrities who had less than positive experiences extends beyond just awkward interviews. For some, it was the very format of the show, particularly its penchant for putting guests in high pressure, sometimes humiliating situations for the sake of a game segment that left a lasting negative impression. A prime example of this is the story of Hasan Minhaj. The comedian and host of Patriot Act appeared on Ellen in 2019. He was a rising star, known for his sharp political commentary and energetic stage presence. During his interview segment, things went well. The conversation was engaging and funny. But then came the game. It was called Who's This? And the premise was simple. Hasan would be shown a picture of a celebrity, and he had to identify them and say the first thing that came to his mind. The problem was, Ellen's team had added a cruel twist. Underneath Hasan's podium was a device designed to pop up and scare him every time he got an answer wrong. Though the rules of what constituted wrong seemed arbitrary and designed for maximum comedic effect at his expense. Hassan later recounted the entire experience on a segment of his own show, and his telling revealed just how stressful and unpleasant the ordeal was for him. He explained that before the show, a producer briefed him on the game but downplayed the scare element, making it seem like a minor, fun gag. But when the game started, the scare was intense and relentless. What viewers saw as a few funny jump scares, Hassan experienced as a genuinely nerve-wracking situation. He described the immense pressure of trying to be funny and charming, while also being repeatedly startled. The most uncomfortable moment came when he was shown a picture of actor Justin Timberlake. Hassan, trying to be funny and topical, made a joke about Timberlake's recent tabloid controversy. The joke was mild, but the producers, seemingly in an effort to create more drama, buzzed him anyway and triggered the scare mechanism. Hassan was confused and flustered. He felt like he was being punished for trying to play the game as intended, to be a witty comedian. But the most revealing part of Hassan's story was what happened during the commercial break. He said that Ellen, who had been laughing throughout the segment, turned to him and, in a moment of what he perceived as genuine concern, asked if he was okay. She then explained that the scare was much more intense than she had realized, and that the producers had used a new, more powerful version of the scare device for his segment. According to Hassan, she even seemed to reprimand her own staff for it. This moment is fascinating because it adds a layer of complexity to the narrative. On one hand, it shows Ellen potentially being unaware of the full extent of the stress being placed on her guest. On the other hand, it also highlights a system where producers were apparently willing to push the envelope, creating an uncomfortable and even frightening experience for a guest, all for the sake of a few seconds of television. Hassan's story isn't about a personal feud with Ellen. He didn't leave with animosity towards her personally. However, the experience was so negative that it became a central anecdote he would tell about the absurd pressures of talk show appearances. It's unlikely he would have been eager to return for another round of a game that caused him so much genuine distress. He wasn't necessarily banned, but the show's own format created an environment that was inhospitable to him. It showcased a culture where the guest's comfort was secondary to the gag, a theme that would resonate deeply when former employees began to speak out about the show's overall work environment. Another powerful story that speaks to this theme comes from Nikki DeGeneres, the makeup artist and YouTube superstar known as Nikki Tutorials. In January 2020, Nikki bravely came out as a transgender woman in a video that was viewed by tens of millions of people. It was a huge moment for her and for the LGBTQ+ community. Shortly after, she was invited to be a guest on the Ellen DeGeneres show. For many, this seemed like a perfect fit. Ellen, as one of the most famous openly gay women in the world, was seen as a major advocate for the community. An appearance on her show would be a huge platform for Nikki to share her story, and would be seen as a gesture of solidarity from one LGBTQ+ trailblazer to another. However, the experience was anything but positive for Nikki. She spoke about her time on the show in an interview with a Dutch publication a few months later. Her disappointment was palpable. She described the entire environment as cold and distant. "Let me say that there's a big difference between what you see on camera and what it's like behind the scenes," she began. "It's a whole different world." Nikki explained that she was greeted by an overworked intern, and that she wasn't even allowed to use a private bathroom because it was reserved for the Jonas Brothers, who were also guests that day. But her main criticism was leveled at Ellen herself. She said, "I was expecting a 'Welcome to the Ellen DeGeneres show' with confetti, but instead I was greeted by an angry intern who was a bit overworked. I was expecting a Disney show, but got Teletubbies after dark." When asked specifically about Ellen, Nikki said she was distant and cold. She felt that there was no real connection, that she was just another cog in the machine of the show. This is a particularly damning account because it strikes at the very heart of Ellen's brand. The show was supposed to be a welcoming, joyful place, and Ellen an icon of warmth and acceptance, especially for fellow members of the LGBTQ+ community. Nikki's experience suggested that this was just a facade. For someone like Nikki, who had just shared her most vulnerable truth with the world, to be met with coldness and indifference in a space that was supposed to be safe and celebratory was deeply disillusioning. Her story resonated with many because it wasn't about a joke gone wrong or a personal feud. It was about a fundamental lack of kindness and respect, the very things Ellen publicly championed. After her interview went public, Nikki's story was shared widely and became another key piece of evidence for those arguing that the "Be Kind" motto was pure hypocrisy. It's safe to say that, after publicly calling out the host and the show's environment, a return invitation was not forthcoming. Nikki was, effectively, if not officially, banned for speaking her truth about the experience, a truth that directly contradicted the carefully crafted image of the show. The concept of a ban isn't always about a single explosive event. Sometimes it's about a slow burn, a pattern of behavior that makes a celebrity's appearances consistently uncomfortable. Taylor Swift, one of the biggest pop stars of her generation, had a series of appearances on Ellen's show early in her career that, when viewed today, feel incredibly invasive and cringeworthy. Throughout the late 2000s and early 2010s, a recurring theme of Taylor's interviews with Ellen was her dating life. Ellen seemed obsessed with it, relentlessly grilling the young star about who she was dating, who she had dated, and which of her songs were about which ex-boyfriend. In one particularly infamous interview in 2012, Ellen put a slideshow on the giant screen behind them, featuring pictures of Taylor with various famous men, including Joe Jonas, Taylor Lautner, and Justin Bieber. Ellen's goal was to get Taylor to ring a bell whenever she saw a picture of a man she had dated. Taylor was visibly mortified. She repeatedly begged Ellen to stop, saying, "I don't want to. I don't want to. Please stop." She said, "This makes me feel so bad about myself. Every time I come up here, you put a different group of guys on the screen, and it just makes me really question what I stand for as a human being." Her plea was genuine and heartfelt, but Ellen pushed forward, treating her guests' distress as part of the entertainment. She told Taylor not to flatter herself and continued with the segment. Taylor eventually broke down in mock tears, trying to play along, but her discomfort was real. This was not an isolated incident. In another appearance, Ellen tried to get Taylor to call Zac Efron, whom she was rumored to be dating, live on the show. These segments were presented as fun and games, but they were predicated on embarrassing a young woman and reducing her artistic output to a series of diary entries about boys. In the context of the 2022nd, with a greater cultural understanding of sexism and media scrutiny, these interviews look incredibly problematic. They played into a narrative that plagued Taylor Swift for years, one that dismissed her songwriting talent and focused solely on her personal life. While Taylor Swift was never formally banned, she was too big of a star for that. It's notable that as her career progressed and she gained more power and control over her own narrative, her appearances on Ellen's show became far less frequent. After that 2012 interview, she didn't return for several years. When she did come back, the tone of the interviews was different. She was more guarded, more in control, and less willing to play along with the invasive games. It's a case where the ban might have been self-imposed. Taylor and her team likely recognized that the show's environment was not conducive to the image she was trying to build, one of a serious artist and businesswoman. The repeated focus on her dating life was not just uncomfortable, it was damaging to her brand. The Ellen interviews from that era stand as a powerful example of how the show's culture could be dismissive and even harmful to its guests, especially young women, forcing them to either endure the humiliation or stay away altogether. Sometimes, a celebrity's absence from the show is more mysterious, based on rumors and industry whispers rather than a clear public incident. Vince Vaughn is one such case. The popular comedic actor was a frequent guest on talk shows throughout his career to promote his many films. However, according to reports and online discussions, he was allegedly banned from Ellen's show after a specific appearance in 2015 while promoting his film Unfinished Business. The details are murky, but the rumor centers on a comment Vaughn made in an interview with British GQ that was published around the same time. In that interview, Vaughn, a vocal libertarian, expressed his support for the Second Amendment, stating that he believed guns should be allowed in schools. He argued that banning guns in certain places only creates targets for attackers. "You think the politicians that run my country and your country don't have guns in the schools their kids go to? They do," he said. and we should be allowed the same rights. This is, obviously, a highly controversial political stance in the United States. The theory goes that Ellen, a prominent liberal and advocate for gun control, was deeply opposed to Vaughn's views. His public statements were in direct conflict with her own political and social beliefs. While the on-air interview in 2015 was professional and did not touch on the controversial topic, the timing of his comments in the GQ article is seen by many as the reason he was never invited back. Proponents of this theory point to Ellen's history of using her platform to advocate for her political causes. She was outspoken about her support for same-sex marriage, animal rights, and gun control. It's plausible that she or her producers would make a conscious decision not to promote a celebrity who was so publicly advocating for a position they found abhorrent. This case is different from others because there was no on-air confrontation. It speaks to a different kind of ban, one based on ideology. If the rumors are true, it represents a decision by the show to curate its guests not just based on their star power, but on their alignment with the show's political and social values. On one hand, this can be seen as a principled stand. A host has the right to control their platform and not give a voice to views they find dangerous or offensive. On the other hand, it can be seen as a form of censorship, creating an echo chamber where only guests with agreeable viewpoints are welcome. Whatever the truth of the Vince Vaughn situation, his conspicuous and prolonged absence from the show for the remainder of its run led many to believe that he had crossed an invisible line and was deemed too controversial for the Be Kind brand. Another interesting case study in the show's ideological gatekeeping is Caitlyn Jenner. When Caitlyn Jenner came out as a transgender woman in 2015, it was a landmark cultural moment. Ellen, as a fellow LGBTQ+ icon, invited her onto the show for a major interview. Much of the interview was positive and supportive, with Ellen giving Caitlyn a platform to share her story. However, one specific exchange created a moment of deep awkwardness and seemed to cause a rift between the two. Ellen asked Caitlyn about her views on same-sex marriage. Caitlyn, a lifelong Republican, had previously expressed evolving, somewhat traditional views on the topic. In the interview, her answer was hesitant and complicated. She said, "I have to admit that I remember 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever it was when the whole gay marriage thing came up. I was not for it." She explained that she was a traditionalist and believed marriage was between a man and a woman. She then said her view had evolved and that she didn't want to stand in front of anybody's happiness. But her delivery lacked conviction, and she concluded by saying, "It's not quite there yet." Ellen, a staunch advocate for marriage equality who had been at the forefront of the fight, was visibly taken aback. She gently pushed back, saying, "It's funny, 'cause you're a woman." The implication was clear. How could someone from a marginalized community not fully support the rights of another marginalized community? After the show aired, the exchange became a major talking point. Ellen later appeared on Howard Stern's radio show and spoke about the interview. She told Stern that she found Caitlyn's views confusing and that she didn't seem to fully support gay marriage. She said, "She still has a judgment about gay marriage, and I said, you're wanting people to understand and accept you. And you still have a judgment about gay people and marriage." Caitlyn Jenner, in her own memoir, The Secrets of My Life, wrote about the incident. She felt that Ellen had blindsided her with the question and that the subsequent public criticism, fueled by Ellen's comments on Stern's show, had alienated her from the LGBTQ community. She wrote that she felt she had been portrayed as anti-gay, which she insisted was not true. After this public back and forth, Caitlyn Jenner was not invited back to the show. The ideological clash was too great. Ellen had used her platform to challenge Caitlyn's views, and Caitlyn felt she had been treated unfairly. It was a clear instance where a guest's political evolution, or lack thereof, did not meet the host's standards, leading to a public falling out and an effective ban from the show. The stories of these celebrities, from Dakota Johnson's quiet correction to Kathy Griffin's public feud, from Mariah Carey's traumatic ordeal to Nikki Tutorial's disillusionment, all point to a consistent theme. The environment on and around the Ellen DeGeneres show was not always the happy, kind, and safe space it was portrayed to be. The power imbalance between the host and the guests was significant, and that power was sometimes used in ways that were uncomfortable, invasive, or even cruel. For a guest, the choice was often to play along with the gags and the prying questions, or risk a confrontation that could lead to being ostracized. The term banned might not always mean a formal written decree was issued. It can mean creating an environment so unwelcoming that a guest would never want to return. It can mean a public fallout so significant that a future appearance is impossible. Or it can mean an ideological disagreement so profound that the show decides a guest is no longer brand safe. These incidents, which occurred over many years, were the warning signs. They were the cracks in the facade that, for a long time, only the people in the room could see. Eventually, these individual stories coalesced into a larger narrative, one that was amplified by the dozens of former employees who came forward with their own accounts of a toxic workplace. The experiences of these celebrities were not just isolated moments of awkward television. They were a preview of the downfall of an empire built on a promise of kindness that, for many, was never kept. Let's revisit the anatomy of these interactions. What made them so compelling and, in hindsight, so revealing? It was the break in the unwritten social contract of the daytime talk show. Guests are expected to be on. They are there to promote a product, a movie, an album, a book, and the unspoken agreement is that they will be charming, witty, and slightly self-deprecating in exchange for the host's promotional platform. The host, in turn, is supposed to be a gracious and friendly guide, leading the conversation in a way that makes the guest look good. The interviews on Ellen's show that went wrong were the ones where this contract was violated, almost always by the host. When Ellen put Taylor Swift on the spot with a slideshow of her exes, she broke the contract. The goal was no longer to make Taylor look good, it was to generate a reaction at her expense. Taylor's visible distress was the punchline. When Ellen ambushed Mariah Carey with a bottle of champagne, she obliterated the contract. The goal was to force a deeply personal piece of information out of her guest, regardless of the emotional or physical consequences. What Dakota Johnson did was so powerful because she calmly and rationally pointed out the breach of contract. Ellen's opening gambit, "I wasn't invited," was itself a subtle violation. It was a passive-aggressive accusation disguised as a joke. The expected response, according to the talk show contract, was for Dakota to be flustered, to apologize, to make a self-deprecating joke. "Oh my gosh, Ellen, I'm so sorry. My people must have messed up. You'll be the first on the list for my next birthday." That's the script. By saying, "Actually, that's not the truth," Dakota refused to read her lines. She was, in essence, holding up the contract and saying, "You're the one who broke the terms here, not me." The ensuing scramble by Ellen was the reaction of someone who was not used to being held accountable, of a host whose script had been thrown out the window. It revealed that the light-hearted, spontaneous chat was, in fact, a carefully controlled performance, and that Ellen's power depended on her guests' compliance. In the end, Ellen's guest list wasn't just about entertainment, it reflected her values and boundaries. Whether it was homophobic remarks, political clashes, or personal feuds, each ban tells a story about her boundaries behind the scenes. And now, you know exactly why some big names never got that iconic couch moment.